Welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Dr. Jeff Musgrave. Super pumped to talk about a topic very near and dear to my heart, and that is dialing in your exercise dosage. So we're going to be talking a little bit about Prilepin's chart. So this may sound like a foreign language to you, a foreign word, or you may have a lot of experience here, but let me frame up what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about being in that scenario where you've established someone's one rep max, you have an idea of what their capacity is, but then it's time to figure out how many sets and reps do you need. And you're kind of trying to figure out like, okay, I think they can do about this many. We did an AMRAP set maybe, and that was their max for 6 reps, but now it's time to like just do that daily work. And I don't want to do an AMRAP set every time they walk in because I know they're going to get super sore. So what do I do? How do I put these sets and reps together with appropriate percentages of their one rep max to make sure we're really getting somewhere? We're going to talk about that in just a minute. We're going to dive deep. So all of my fellow programming nerds or people that are programming nerds in training, buckle up. It's going to be a good one today. So before we get into that, if you're looking to up your Jerry game in 2023, next cohort of it, Essential Foundations is going to be rolling August 9th. Advanced Concepts is going to be October 12th. Next opportunity for live is a doubleheader, June 2nd. We're going to be in Hendersonville, Tennessee, and Missoula, Montana. Lots of opportunities to see us on the road, catch us live, round out that MMOA cert so that you can treat my mom or my dad if they need care in your neck of the woods. All right, team. So let's dive into Prilepin's chart. So first, we've got to talk about what is Prilepin's chart. We're going to talk about the basics of how to use it and then special considerations for older adults. So Prilepin's chart was created by Alexander Prilepin. So this gentleman, well-respected Olympic weightlifting coach in the 70s and 80s. So what he did is based on observations of working with these very highly trained athletes in these complex movements. He had a decade of training logs trying to dial in just exactly what an athlete can handle, what percentage, what sets, what reps are most appropriate to make sure that you get the most bang for your buck, but people can still recover. So they're not so gassed they can't continue training that week. So that's kind of where this started in the 70s and 80s. He created this chart. It's since continued to be popular in the Olympic weightlifting world, but has since been adopted into powerlifting. And at this point, you're thinking, what does this have to do with older adults? Hang with me. We are going to get there, my friends. So I'm going to walk you through kind of the basics of how this chart is set up. It's very easy to pull this thing up on Google. So Prilepin's chart, okay? So the first column, you're going to see percentages of a 1RM. Now, sometimes those will start at higher percentages to lower or lower to higher. The version I'm looking at is 55 to 65% of someone's one rep max. That could be real or estimated, okay? A lot of times in the Jerry space, we're getting an estimated one rep max. We're not always pushing people up to that maximal effort for one rep. The second column, you're going to see reps per set. Reps per set. The third column, you're going to see optimal total reps. Total reps for that full strength session. How many total reps should we get? What's optimal based on that percentage? And then there's kind of a range. Like, okay, maybe you didn't hit exactly that number of reps, but it gives you some guardrails. You need to do a minimum of this and probably a maximum of that. If you're below the minimum, you can expect you're probably not going to have the strength adaptation you're looking for. If you're above the maximum, plus or minus, by and large, you may be doing too much volume at that percentage for a solid recovery. Recovery may be delayed. There's no big leaps here where we're saying, okay, if we'll say, for example, the first chart is 55 to 65% of one rep max. The reps per set, 3 to 6 reps per set. So sets of 3, 4, 5, or 6, and then a total number of reps of 24. So in the rep range of 18 to 30, so less than 18 in that scenario, 55 to 65% of a 1 rep max, we're expecting probably not going to get good strength adaptation. On the other end of that, if we're talking about over 30 reps, we're not saying someone's going to get injured. We're not saying, oh, over 30 reps, ooh, injury is going to happen. It's just based on those observations across that decade working with these athletes. Alexander Prilepin found that, that may be that volume at that percentage may take a little longer to recover. Okay, so we've got percentage of 1 rep max, the number of reps per set. So you've got a range there, total reps per that strength session, and then range of repetitions. So I'm now going to go through this for a pretty common scenario. A lot of our older adults, bottom thresholds maybe 60%. A lot of us are trying to get our older adult clients, or regardless of who you're working with, if you've got strength goals, we're really trying to get 70 to 80% of someone's 1 rep max, or estimated 1 rep max. So in that scenario, if you're looking at Prilepin's chart, percentage of 1RM between 70 and 80%. 70 to 80%. Reps per set, we're looking at 3 to 6 reps per set. Total reps, 18, in a range of 12 to 24. So pretty common to see a setup like this. We could do 3 sets of 6 reps for a total of 18. It's 70% of someone's 1 rep max. And we're at the optimal total rep range of 18. We're within that 12 to 24 marker on our total volume. You could also do the opposite of that rep and set scheme and still hit the parameters. So in that scenario, you could use 70% of someone's 1 repetition max, and you could do 6 sets of 3 reps. Now, those are totally different experiences, all within this set. So there's some wiggle room based on how your athlete, how your client is responding to the set and rep scheme. So that's the lower and middle part of the chart. And just to get a feel for this, if you're listening and you're not looking at it, if you were trying to work at the high end, you've built someone up, they've got big strength goals, they need to do something, lift something really heavy, maybe just once or twice. Then we're looking at 90+% of maybe someone's 1 rep max deadlift to pick up something really heavy they have to do infrequently. At 90+% of someone's 1 repetition max, the reps per set is 1 to 2. 1 to 2 reps per set. Optimal total reps, 4. 4 total. Working at 90+% is exhausting. The range of reps, max 10, but we're talking significant rest in between those. So just to give you an idea, I feel like a lot of us, when it comes to exercise dosage, we were only taught 3 sets of 10. Now, when you're looking at this chart, 3 sets of 10 doesn't really have a home in here. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing from the standpoint of moving on into strength goals away from like that hypertrophy model that we learned about. But this is really helpful when we're talking about building some guardrails. So you can pick the percentage of your 1 rep max, and maybe for a new older adult, as we're kind of starting to talk about, how do we use this for older adults? How do we frame this up for them? Maybe we're working on using this with someone who we need an early win. They're a new lifter. So we're maybe going to start lower at 55 to 65%, lower end, because we want them to be successful. And then we're looking at the rep and set range, reps per set, and we're going to do lower reps, higher sets, and try to hit that total rep range of 24. So that may be where we start. And then as they get stronger, they build some confidence. We've built that therapeutic alliance. We may want to be eking up that percentage of 1 rep max as we go along. So that's one way, one simple way to use Prilepin's chart. Now you can really dive into this and use it in a lot of different scenarios where maybe you're keeping the reps and sets the same. And like we just talked about, we're going up in percentages, or maybe you're working at the same percentage and you need to add volume to hit that person's goal. But the big thing Couple caveats I want to cover here about using Prilepin's chart. Just full disclosure, this has not been validated for older adults per se. Okay. So this is not in the older adult literature to use this. We do want to be mindful that this was based on observations, very successful. There's lots of anecdotal research and use for this, even in study designs for in the strength and conditioning world, where they'll use Prilepin's chart to determine percentages, sets, and reps. But want to keep in mind that this was originally used for people doing Olympic lifts, the clean and jerk, and the snatch. So these are complicated, high-speed power movements where technique had to really be harnessed in and was watched very closely. So a lot of people in the powerlifting world will say that these percentages and rep ranges are actually a little bit conservative. And that may make it a perfect fit for using with older adults, where we know the more deconditioned they are, the more quickly they're going to respond, and a little bit goes a long way early on. Now, we're going to want to ramp that up in our dosage and try to hit those higher percentages and continue to dial that in over time. But because it is probably slightly underdosed, because those athletes had to move very quickly in complicated movements and we're likely doing 2 to 3 sessions a week, when we're trying to think about our scenario of maybe working with someone 1 time a week, we may need to add something to this after those first couple sessions. We may need to do things like an AMRAP set at the end. If it looks like we're really not pushing the volume enough to get the changes that we think we need, we're maybe not hitting intensity to get that adaptation, you may need to add an AMRAP set. Get to that heaviest weight. Maybe you're shooting for 3 or 4 reps and say, give me as many as you can with good form. I'll stop you if your form starts to break down. So adding an AMRAP set, if this is truly underdosed for your older adults, can be super helpful. The other caveat that I want to share is that in general, just remember, older adults are not aliens. If you're new to working with older adults, strength and conditioning principles are relevant and very helpful when we're looking at trying to create adaptations for them. The last thing I want to share here about special considerations using Prilepin's chart for older adults is, in general, older adults' musculoskeletal conditions do better with lower volume, higher percentages. Lower volume, higher percentages in general are going to be more helpful for older adults, less likely to flare up their symptoms and cause exacerbations. So if you're using this with older adults, the fact that it's slightly underdosed and you can simply add an AMRAP set at the end, if you're only getting to see that client once a week to make sure they've got that optimally dosed session, which we saw in the white paper from Dale Avers, super helpful paper if you're still working on that phase of dialing in a 1 repetition max and conceptualizing this. But no, in general, those lower rep ranges, higher percentages are actually going to go better for a lot of our older adults for strength adaptation. I keep saying the last thing. One more point, team. One more point. So if it looks like there's a breakdown of these percentages in effort because you're working with typically a less trained patient or athlete that may not have experience with weight training, we may want to use rating of perceived exertion, RPE, to make sure we're really hitting that percentage we think we are. There's going to be lots of barriers to technique that early on, they're going to be probably artificially lighter than what their actual muscular capacity, because there are barriers on their technique. Okay. So I threw a lot at you there at the end. Some takeaways here. Prilepin's chart can be very helpful early on for getting to know your client. If you're new to figuring out estimated 1 rep max and then trying to set up sets and reps that make sense based on the percentage you're working at, this is a great starting place. Prilepin's chart is not a formula. You don't just plug and play and it gives you the perfect answer. I want you to think about it like using it as guardrails. What's a minimally effective dose to create strength adaptation? What's maybe a little bit too much starting out, where recovery is going to be prolonged and it may threaten our therapeutic alliance? And then just keep in mind, in general, lower reps are going to be helpful, smaller sets, especially for building confidence. All right, team, that's just scratching the surface. Prilepin's chart I found to be helpful from a programming standpoint in group and personal training with older adults. And in general, those reps and sets usually work out pretty well. Just be ready to make some minor adjustments. Go to town. I think it's going to be super helpful for you. I'd love to hear in the comments if you're already using this with older adults or with anyone, what your experience has been like. Love to wrap on that. Team, have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. See you next time.